Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me today. This is your TJPS Morning News Rundown for Friday, May 16th, 2025. Yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a pivotal case that could redefine the nation's approach to birthright citizenship and limit federal judges' authority to issue nationwide injunctions. At the heart of this debate is Donald Trump's executive order issued on January 20th, 2025, aiming to deny automatic U.S. citizenship to children born on American soil to undocumented immigrants or those on temporary visas. This challenges the long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which grants citizenship to anyone born in the United States. The court appeared to be unified in pushing back against the Solicitor General, who once argued before the court that the president could order SEAL Team 6 to kill a political opponent and nothing could be done. These were some highlights.
You're losing a bunch of cases, this guy over here, this woman over here, they'll have to be treated as citizens, but nobody else will. Why would you ever take this case to us? In a case in which the government is losing constantly, there's nobody else who's going to appeal, they're winning. It's up to you to decide whether to take this case to us. If I were in your shoes, there is no way I'd approach the Supreme Court with this case. This is not a hypothetical. This is happening out there, right? Every court has ruled against you. Look, there are all kinds of abuses of nationwide injunctions. But I think that the question that this case presents is that if one thinks that it's quite clear that the EO is illegal, how does one get to that result? In what time frame? On your set of rules without the possibility of a nationwide injunction?
On this case and on many similar cases, the appropriate way to do it is for there to be multiple lower courts considering it, the appropriate percolation that goes to the lower courts, and then ultimately this court decides the merits in a nationwide binding precedent. You have a complete inversion of that through the nationwide injunctions where the district
So, General Sauer, are you really going to answer Justice Kagan by saying there's no way to do this expeditiously?
So when a new president orders that because there's so much gun violence going on in the country, and he comes in and he says, I have the right to take away the guns from everyone, then people, and he sends out the military to seize everyone's guns. We and the courts have to sit back and wait until every named plaintiff or every plaintiff whose gun is taken comes into court. So as far as I see it, this order violates 4 Supreme Court precedents.
Yeah,
and you are claiming that not just the Supreme Court, that both the Supreme Court and no lower court can stop an executive from universally from violating those holdings by this court.
Your argument seems to turn our justice system, in my view at least, into a catch-me-if-you-can kind of regime from the standpoint of the executive, where everybody has to have a lawyer and file a lawsuit in order for the government to stop violating people's rights. Justice Kagan says, let's assume for the purpose of this that you're wrong about the merits, that the government is not allowed to do this under the Constitution, and yet it seems to me that your argument says we get to keep on doing it until everyone who is potentially harmed by it figures out how to file a lawsuit, hire a lawyer, et cetera. And I don't understand how that is remotely consistent with the rule of law.
The outcome of this case could have far-reaching implications, potentially affecting over 150,000 newborns each year and reshaping the nation's immigration and citizenship policies, as citizenship would flip back and forth depending on which state you crossed into. And regarding nationwide injunctions, it would be a direct assault on judicial independence and holding the executive branch accountable when it does something illegal and unconstitutional. Executive orders are not law. They are simply words on a paper that can be revoked and stricken down by any court in the nation. A decision from the Supreme Court is expected soon about this case. We'll continue to monitor this developing story and provide you updates as they become available. On June 30th, 1956, TWA Flight 2, bound for Kansas City, and United Flight 718, bound for Chicago, both took off from LAX. And for anyone who's ever been to LAX, you know that this is a very busy airport. Constant flights in and out, and both of these aircrafts that day, there were 128 combined passengers and crew members. They were flying under the IFR, Instrument Flight Rules, which means that essentially they were supposed to be under air traffic control, but for some reason, those communications were not getting through. There was limited radar coverage, and the poor weather, a terrible combination when it comes to flying. Both planes ended up requesting to deviate from their original paths to avoid storm clouds. But again, communications were down, and both at 21,000 feet in the air. At around 10:30 a.m., as the planes flew over the Grand Canyon, they collided mid-air, causing an explosion. This aerial footage here shows the crash site of each aircraft. It was absolutely devastating. All 128 died instantly. It was the deadliest U.S. plane crash in U.S. history at the time. It was the front page news everywhere. And of course, we're going to have to ask the obvious question: how did this happen? And why did this happen? There were several factors, including the catastrophic failure of the existing air traffic system at the time. Essentially, there was no real-time radar tracking of commercial flights in the United States. Air traffic controllers at the time relied on estimated positions of flights, and there was no collision avoidance system or protocols in place. This crash and those massive failures was such a shock to the nation at the time that Congress actually launched an investigation immediately, led by the Civil Aeronautics Board, and they concluded that we need three things. One, we need a single authority to manage all U.S. airspace. Two, we need a modern radar, essentially a modern system that can track radars in this country, and also not just an antiquated, aviation system. And three, we need communication and pilot training to be improved, for the sake of safety in this country with people flying. So 2 years later, the Federal Aviation Act was passed, and in 1967, it became part of the Department of Transportation, an agency made to ensure U.S. airspace was safe and nothing like that 1958 plane crash would ever happen again. This is Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla. And in January of this year, 2025, his new Starship rocket was set for a test flight, and all of a sudden, mid-air, it just exploded. It was chaotic. Debris from the rocket went everywhere, from the Turks and Caicos Islands to Puerto Rico, causing property damage and flight diversions. The FAA had to temporarily halt flights into major Florida airports. Airlines such as Delta, JetBlue, and American Airlines reported delays and diversions. Flights that were literally in the sky had to be rerouted, and passengers were catching footage of the falling explosive debris from their windows. The SpaceX flight test was such an aviation scare and disaster that the FAA actually grounded all Starship launches pending an investigation. Elon Musk, though, did not like that, and like the little petulant person that he is, he made sure to force out the FAA director, Michael Whitaker. 9 days later, this happened. American Airlines Flight 5342 exploded mid-air after colliding with an Army helicopter. All 67 aboard this aircraft and the 3 on the helicopter died instantly. You'll recall that Trump's first response was to blame DEI. After that, essentially what happened is that Elon Musk and Donald Trump together fired thousands of federal workers. The Trump administration began in that firing of federal workers, targeting air traffic controllers and working to dismantle the FAA. And they've noticed that this is a huge mistake because not too long after they did it, Elon Musk started begging air traffic controllers to come back because flying in this country is, important, of course. And ever since Donald Trump has taken office, flying in this country has become like playing Russian roulette. There have been so many aviation problems this year just in the United States, and the FAA is being dismantled at the same time. I've flown 4 times since Donald Trump has taken office, and this past Wednesday was my most recent flight. And some of the announcements that were coming over the intercom at IAH in Houston were about air traffic, essentially controller teams, a shortage of it. My flight was not affected by that, and I ended up making it home safely. But the very next day, this news broke here. Newark air traffic controllers lost contact with pilots at least twice before. Controller says after latest outage, quote, at least 8 or 9 times in recent months, controllers lost radio contact with pilots flying into one of the nation's busiest airports, said the Newark airspace controller who was asked not to be identified. Quote, we lost all radios, no backups, the controller said. Everything went down. This comes a week after controllers in Area C of the Philadelphia Tricon, which guides flights in and out of Newark, lost all communications on April 28th with the pilots bound for that airport, a near disaster that is now under investigation. This is local reporting from ABC 6 News.
I just got told that the approach lost all their radars. 3 of their 4 radar screens went black, and they have no frequencies.
So ABC News learned the outage lasted between 60 to 90 seconds. The FAA in Philadelphia could not see or talk to planes in the Newark airspace. The union says this prompted the controllers involved to take time off because of the traumatic event, and that led to staffing issues at Philadelphia's Operations Center.
So that was that Wednesday. This was on Friday, reported by the AP. Again, air traffic controllers at the Newark airport lost connection again for 90 seconds. This was Monday in Denver, Colorado. Pilots lost communication with air traffic controllers at Denver International Airport for 90 seconds. According to reporting from ABC News, the air traffic controllers had to scramble to use their backups. Trump's Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy recently said that this kind of problem will be spreading to other airports across the nation, saying that we need to upgrade our systems and bring in more employees. I wonder where the others went. Things are so bad in the eyes of Secretary Duffy that he switched the airport where his wife was supposed to fly out of. He literally moved his wife's flight from Newark to another airport. Now, he claims that it was because of delays and not safety, but it's quite a coincidence. This week, the Transportation Secretary testified before the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate. This was him testifying before the Senate and the House Appropriations Committee over FAA staffing cuts and funding freezes. Also the problems about what's going on at these airports across the nation.
But I think we need to be a little bit more precise in downsizing a department with a mission as critical as DOT's. The dismissal of probationary employees has brought a reduction to the workforce of 3,000. When you add 2 rounds of buyouts, DOT will see a 12% reduction in staffing since January of 20. I also understand that OMB requested a reduction in force plan to be submitted by mid-March. So the question is pretty simple. How many departures can you handle without eroding the ability to carry out a safe and effective mission?
So first off, you mentioned the reprogramming, and I know there's requirements to report to Congress if there is going to be reprogramming. We are working through some ideas right now on how we can streamline the department. When we've completed those ideas, we will no doubt share them with you for your consideration. Listen, we can do more with less, Mr. Chairman. And if we do more with less, that means that we'll have additional money, I think, through this committee to put back into the infrastructure that so many of us dearly want in our communities.
How many of the over 2,000 FAA employees that have been pushed out over the last few months will be needed to be brought back in order to modernize the system?
I don't think any of them will need to be brought back. And I would just say in the characterization of the last 3 minutes, I would disagree with much of what you said. But I do. The DOT and the FAA, we're not jobs programs. This is about a mission, and I'm committed to you in this body to accomplish that mission. And can we do more with yes? Of course, we can do more with yes. And if some people who want to retire, we should let them retire. Let's bring in people who are hungry then that want to do the mission.
I don't disagree with that.
I appreciate that. But that's what we're doing.
But what we have seen is really critical employees to the mission are now gone. As I said, technicians and mechanics. You can have all your air traffic controllers there, but if they don't have the support staff, we can't know that they're doing the job. That's what I was referring to.
A bill dubbed by Donald Trump as a big, beautiful piece of legislation is currently at the center of tense negotiations in Washington, D.C., but behind the shiny branding lies a dangerous proposal that could slash Medicare and Medicaid as well as SNAP benefits, essential lifelines for millions of Americans, while also handing massive tax breaks to the wealthiest among us. Trump's proposed legislation, being pushed by far-right lawmakers and conservatives think tanks, is being sold as a deficit reduction plan. But make no mistake, it's a Trojan horse. According to draft language circulating on Capitol Hill, the bill would raise the Medicare eligibility age, implement stricter work requirements for Medicaid recipients, and roll back Affordable Care Act expansions that could extend health care to millions. Meanwhile, the bill essentially carves out hundreds of billions in tax breaks for the ultra-wealthy and large corporations, echoing the 2017 Trump tax cuts that added nearly $2 trillion to the national debt. This proposal is already facing fierce opposition from Democratic lawmakers, healthcare advocates, and even some moderate Republicans in swing districts who are worried about backlash from older and working-class voters.
What Republicans are saying is that if we make all of these cuts, we will then shift that and invest it into Medicaid for people who actually deserve it. But if that were true, then the top line number, our budget for Medicaid, would be staying the same, right? We'd be taking from undeserving people and giving it to deserving people, and that should even out. But that's not what's happening in this bill. This bill is cutting nearly $1 trillion in Medicaid spending overall. Why? Because down the hallway, they are trying to finance tax cuts for people who are inheriting $22 million houses.
It has never been a secret that we are going to stand up against SNAP cuts, and to the tune of over $300 billion. This will take away food for SNAP households that are home to a child, an older adult, or a disabled adult. And for what? To pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest people in this country? It is unconscionable.
Literally, House Republicans have voted to take food out of the mouths of children, families, seniors, and veterans as part of their toxic scheme to enact massive tax cuts for their billionaire donors like Elon Musk.
Let's be clear. Medicare and Medicaid and SNAP are not luxuries. They're not handouts. They're essential programs that keep millions of Americans alive. Seniors, low-income families, children with disabilities, they all depend on these services. And so if this bill does pass and it goes to the Senate and then it passes the Senate and it goes to Donald Trump's desk to be signed into law, the richest 1% in this country, they're going to get richer. They're going to benefit from this. It's not going to be everyday working Americans like some Republicans are trying to deceive you that, yeah, this is going to help you. This is going to be for working families. This is literally going to target working families in the absolute worst way, which millions of these people are on Medicare and Medicaid and SNAP. It's going to target you while giving tax cuts to the rich. That's all this is. There is no sugarcoating this. There is no making this seem like it's actually not that bad. It is that bad. And millions are going to die. Thousands, hundreds of thousands are going to die and suffer horribly as a result of this if it passes. That is going to do it for the TJPS Morning News Rundown for today. Please be sure to comment any suggestions, questions, or your thoughts on this video. If you are a fan of the Jeremiah Patterson Show, please recommend it to your family and friends. You can also support us by donating financially, as this is independent journalism, and we rely on your donations to continue this crucial work. Another way to support my work is by becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at TJPS News for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. I will see you tonight for the TJPS Evening News Show and 2 additional videos of very important news stories that will be posted later this afternoon, especially regarding Qatar and Trump accepting a $400 million plane in the insane ethics and corruption violations there that has to be discussed. I have a detailed video coming out on that very soon and other news stories that are happening. Be sure to follow me on Blue Sky and Substack at TJPS News. If you have any questions, news topic requests, or want to do a collaboration, you can email me tjpsnews@gmail.com. I'll see you soon.